So welcome everybody. My name is Scott Bachheim. I lead our cloud services team in our cloud program at Starbucks. And I'm happy to be here today to share a little bit about how we view digital transformation and how we've leveraged our journey into the cloud as an engine to drive that. Before we get into the tech though, we really have to step back to Starbucks' mission, right? To inspire and nurture the human spirit, one cup, one person, one neighborhood at a time. So what does that mean? That means we're very much focused on the experience, that Starbucks experience that you guys all know and love, the people behind delivering that experience, as well as engaging our customers. So what does that mean for digital technology? As the Starbucks technology team looks at digital transformation, it's about deepening that experience, delivering great, exceptional digital experiences that tie into what Starbucks is. It's not the shiny new object. It's not technology just because it was released, that we have to drop it in our stores or we have to deliver it in our mobile app. It's about thinking of our customers and partners first and then bringing that technology to life. So how did the cloud journey help this? Well, for us, how we drive the change in adoption of technology is through our application and services teams. You're going to hear from some of them as part of the panel. And our goal was to extend what they already owned. So they already owned the customer relationship. They already owned their application. And now giving them the full stack of being able to own the infrastructure to build their services, we believe is going to drive agility and velocity, which means that transformation that we're trying to do, that extending the experience, they're going to be able to bring that around the globe to our customers and partners. 3 ways that we did it as part of the program is through delivery support. So my team and with consulting help really helped onboard teams that needed it to develop the skills and understand how to use Azure. Delivering and aiding in coding or architecture was one of the value propositions, but education and development was really the primary. That goes to the second one. Learning and creating formal learning opportunities was key. So we have a philosophy of learning journeys. So these are cohort-based learning opportunities where 20 or 30 of our partners will come together and start at the basics. What is the cloud? How do I log into the Azure portal? But at the end, they have to deliver. They have to deliver really like an output of a hackathon, a sample project, and it is, I've been truly blown away. They come up with customer semantics, analyzing what's going on in Twitter, doing automation, and to see the transformation that they've done really drives innovation. And then lastly is automation. We all know through the conference that we had here today that technology is changing faster and faster, and the cloud gives us the opportunity to deploy that new features and globally that we didn't really have before. So we're trying to bring that automation throughout. So what have we done? So in the last couple of years, we've launched about 20 applications, 20 plus applications in Azure. We leverage over 50 different Azure services. That could be Service Fabric, that's App Service, that's just raw compute where we deploy open source on top of it. We deploy around 7 regions around the globe. So there is very much a global footprint. And then going back to that learning, we've trained over 800 of our partners, which is what we call our employees, in cloud techniques and deployment. So this is just a tip of how we look at it, that lens of our Starbucks mission, what Starbucks technology is trying to do, and what we've done. I'm going to introduce Michael Kilberry now, who will moderate. He's one of the lead architects from Microsoft that's helped us on our cloud journey. And he'll introduce the rest of the panel, and they'll tell their story and their journey of driving digital transformation. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So a little bit about myself. I've been at Microsoft for 7 years, working in various product groups. But for the better part of 2 years, I've been entrenched within Starbucks, really steeping myself in the coffee culture there and helping cultivate a cloud-first mindset and also help cultivate a cloud-first technical set. I've been embedded within Scott's teams and worked with the various other engineering leaders here from Starbucks to help bring their digital transformation to fruition. I'd just like to quickly introduce the rest of the panelists here. Todd, you want to go ahead?
Sure, yeah. I'm Todd Shaver, responsible for retail infrastructure and SRE, or DevOps, in Starbucks. I've been there a couple of years, and I've been kind of sprinkled across most of the topics we'll talk about here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Annette McKee, and I'm the Director of Retail Engineering. And I have the privilege of sharing with you today. We're one of the teams that got to connect with Scott's group, talk to you about the people and the process and how we were successful in getting to the cloud.
Vishwanath Subramanian. My team basically enables data services across the enterprise.
Great. So I think to start off the panel, we wanted to kind of start where the Starbucks digital transformation journey began. And that was really with Vish's team and really focusing on the data platform as building the underpinnings to the digital transformation. Vish, could you tell us a little bit more about how your team transitioned from a more traditional BI shop and more to a modern data science platform?
Absolutely. I think it's been a journey, like any enterprise environment, right? It's been like disparate users, disparate business systems across disparate use cases. So for us, it's been more like the team's been on a journey where it's been more like using data as a product and looking at it from a product lens. So this journey has been like any journey, right? It's basically encompassing multiple phases, right? First, I would say, you would have a phase like where you design your data infrastructure. So this is everything in terms of assessing where we are in terms of current state and where we want to get to. This is everything from modeling the data. You have your data in existing platforms that you want to assess for fit on the cloud. Whether it is or whether it isn't. You also want to make sure you're modeling the data right. Several traditional data systems have Kimball models deployed. How do you now translate those models into the scalability and reliability of the cloud? Then you get into capacity planning. How do you want to also comply with our governance policies across security, across any regulatory compliance that we need to. Then I think you also kind of get into how you want to actually pipeline this data. How do you want to process this data at scale, right? This is everything from how do you handle your traditional Lambda architecture from real time to batch data systems to actually how do you do like schema validation on the fly to everything that helps the consumer with better data quality. Then you kind of transition into the phase, which is like kind of the phase that I'm more excited about, which is kind of, how do you now start building data products on top of this and derived data products, where you essentially now start to, unlock business value and, actual incremental revenue from, these data products. And then, once you have that foundation, you kind of get to this layer where you can now, it's like, open fields to start like, unleashing like machine learning and AI on top of like, maybe denormalized and normalized data layers, which now like, give your users like a ton of flexibility to go ahead and deploy those models in the cloud.
Oh, that's great. And I think just to speak a little bit about the data products, and I think this dovetails a little bit to Annette, I think as we've seen the digital transformation at Starbucks move, we've seen more applications being developed with a business mindset, and leveraging data products that are using machine learning and artificial intelligence to inform our new applications. So Annette, I think as you now, being an engineering leader, and moved from a traditional data or application development suite to more a serverless microservice approach that would leverage some of Vish's data products. Can you speak to how your team has handled that transition?
I can. So to give you some context in terms of how the team transformed is, I'll give you the business problem that we were trying to solve. So inventory management, you can imagine at our scale, every store that you go into, you have the opportunity to purchase a handcrafted beverage, a food item, and we need to know what the inventory is. In the past, our application was what I would call closed, very vertical, and our data was locked, and it was hard to get to that information unless we were doing some very purpose-built extraction of the data and doing some reporting. So the team very quickly took a look at that, and we said, we've got to get to real-time data. So for us, the transformation was really thinking differently, and it was really about moving into the data part of it, where it ended up being a 10x unlock for us, getting that data available not only to inventory, but if you think about some of our digital transformation, our mobile application, our reader boards, recommendations, like it's just a fantastic unlock for us.
So can you talk to us a little bit about how, since your team went through that transition, a little bit more about the training that your team went through, how you were able to move some of those more traditional development skill sets into the more modern ones and what you built on top of?
Sure. So first of all, a shout out, I think I can see a couple of the team members. They had a fantastic team. They were curious technologists. They understood the business problem and the domain, so they didn't have to spend time thinking about that. They really got to focus on just learning everything that was new. Starbucks, to their credit, did a great job. We had a very specific strategy about getting to the cloud. The team actually went to the first thing they did, there was a lunch and learn, and we got some subscriptions to a sandbox, and we got to go out to the Azure portal and just poke around and learn. After that, we went, as Scott mentioned, we went into some more formal trainings. So we had a lunch and learn, a cloud learning journey. Super role-based, so there was engineering focused, there was analyst, there was the S-step focused. Each one of those, they went through the learning journey, and at the end they had a project that they got to do, and they did the presentation of that. Once we passed that, then we knew that we were ready to take on the actual project itself, and that's when we really started getting into the cloud and the capabilities it offered.
Great.
Yeah.
So I think dovetailing from that to Todd here, can you tell us, being responsible for retail infrastructure and technology and SRE within Starbucks, how your team has been helping the rest of Starbucks organization prepare for the cloud? And tell us a little bit more, if the audience isn't sure what SRE even is.
Sure. In the intro, I kind of mentioned it has some synonymous feel with DevOps, but essentially we were hired early on to help bring DevOps concepts to Starbucks. It existed in various pockets and places, but we wanted to put some common thinking around it, common language around it. We evolved that into SRE, or reliability engineering, a more appropriate feel for how we're approaching this in our space. It's essentially bringing software and automation solutions to running operations, right? And with a real specific focus on reliability and scalability. So it's really that infrastructure engineering on behalf of the different platforms and applications we support. Our contribution, though, to the cloud program, I mentioned earlier, it was kind of sprinkled all over the place. We use in our SRE space, we kind of use a term called smoke jumping. We have a lot of folks, some of them are kind of unicorny in their skill sets, but they jump in and work with different application teams to just essentially enable them. We think of ourselves as DevOps enablers. So we did a few different things. We embedded folks into teams like Annette's and others to help them with their journey with cloud. They were all folks that we hired that had a lot of cloud experience, a lot of infrastructure development experience, but to partner with figuring out their journey and their solutions, right? We also embedded folks into Scott's program directly to help with process engineering, the onboarding space, as you know, to try to get velocity as teams learn what they were doing. And probably the biggest thing that we're still in the middle of is building sort of a reference architecture, a repository of all the things that are getting built. The last thing you need is everybody, you know, reinventing the wheel as they learn through the process. So we put folks in there to help onboard, to try and collect and capture what's being built so they can be reused throughout the enterprise.
Yeah, and if I can just double click on that a little bit more, do you want to talk a little bit about how the cloud programming itself engages across the rest of the application teams, not just from SRE, but cloud, and how all your teams as application teams have worked with the cloud program to kind of uplift in general, and how you've partnered? Yeah, either one. I think Todd, if you were, Annette, if you want to chime in, maybe about how we've embedded some of the cloud developers in your team to kind of do some of that uplift and talk about that.
Sure. So I actually had the privilege of, in addition to my team, we actually had two partners, employees from Microsoft. We had a lead engineer and a DevOps person to help us. They were with us from the get-go, from the start. We had somebody from Todd's team who helped us with what are the sizing considerations? What does our stack look like? How big? How often do we bring it up? Like that was pretty foreign to us in terms of this sizing capabilities. So the team again was surrounded by people who had specific cloud knowledge that we had not yet obtained. So again, we brought the business problem to the table, and then together with those folks that were with us, we were able to really, kind of design and go through from the beginning. Before we ever put hands on the keyboard to code, we had a really great team that had some very good cloud knowledge, and then they could help us with that knowledge there. Yeah, sure.
A couple other things that we did, and I have a specific case. Security is obviously a critical consideration as you're moving, from the comfort of, on-prem out to external hosting. So to jump into and understand how to translate our security controls to moving into the cloud paradigm, we had to kind of start somewhere. So we took another one of these engineers and just said, hey, take our 24 list of controls that we have from a security perspective, and just go out and learn Azure and figure out a way to go and deploy these things in a secure way. Person spent a couple of weeks on that. It didn't necessarily solve every single use case there, but the idea was see how easy or hard it is to execute, find where the gaps are, figure out where we need to engineer something or look for things in the third party or open source. And that became a foundation for us to build upon, right? To build the controls in for how we use Azure. So, yeah. Did you want to add?
So I think just to move back to data for a bit, Vish, could you tell us a little bit more about how you're kind of seeing data move into the cloud moving forward, and how your team is handling the use cases from historical data traditionally moving to more streaming-based approaches, and more about the future of your data science platform as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the considerations for us have evolved accordingly, right? There's like application design considerations when you're moving out from traditional on-prem systems into the cloud. Here, in terms of we have several robust applications that are pretty well maintained, well developed. There's a lot of cost to benefit analysis that we need to do in order to even move them to the cloud, because sometimes it's it's a zero-sum game, because the benefits are not really outweighed by the costs. So, we had to do a lot of considerations in terms of how much it would take for us to design these applications. Secondly, there were integration requirements, right? Regardless of, you have applications that you can move over to the cloud, you still have, integrations with, let's say, third parties, right? You have payment gateways, you have third-party vendors, APIs. So again, that's we had to have specific consideration as let's not move, to the cloud for the sake of moving to the cloud. Let's make sure it makes sense. Also, the other thing which is kind of closer to something that I'm really interested in is user adoption, right? We want to make sure there's a favorite quota, if you want to go if you want to go alone, you won't go too far, right? So if you want to go together, then you get really far. So we want to make sure user adoption is paramount in terms of cloud functionality, whether it's every user from a functional analyst to our top line data scientist who wants to use run Cognitive Toolkit or TensorFlow on the cloud. So we want to make sure those users are also onboarded to the cloud in a smooth and phased manners, and give them an experience that they've been having in the past. Also, interoperability between systems, right? What you have on your on-prem versus what you have in the cloud, so that we're not looking at mass migrations all of the time. So that's some of the key considerations, and also obviously the governance and the privacy factors.
So I think to kind of talk a little bit more about the partnership with Microsoft, I think, Annette, would you mind speaking a little bit more to the uniqueness of the Starbucks-Microsoft relationship, and really what your team has kind of experienced through that partnership?
Sure. For us, again, the Microsoft, we embedded them into our Scrum teams, and they really, one of the things I was really impressed with is we have passionate partners about solving our business problems. They became quite passionate about our business problem as well, and they really understood it. So they were really in lockstep with how the partners think, how do we want to make our customer experience great. and really took the time to learn our business. We were a benefactor. Once they were up to date with our business, we actually got to go to the Microsoft campus in Bellevue. We spent roughly 3 days doing a hackathon with a goal of coming out of that with working code, so that again, no business logic. This was just about the components. How did they work? How did you build them? How did you tear them down? How did you bring them back up? So really, again, having that vendor give us going through this is how we learn, with that really great hands-on experience, that we could get that. So it was really an accelerator for us to be able to do that. Yeah. And they're still with us today.
I think that the hackathons has been a reoccurring theme within Starbucks. I think just being taking advantage of how close we are, bringing the product groups to help us co-engineer some of these more cutting-edge solutions.
Yes.
Namely, anyone else have any other color to add? I know Vish, your team, and Todd, you've had some other interactions with product teams as well.
Yeah, I guess a couple thoughts. I guess I was impressed with how committed up front the program was to helping us be successful. Most folks know that once they go into cloud, they've got a lot to learn on their own, especially with respect to infrastructure, use case guidance, that sort of stuff. But you guys were sort of upfront in partnering with us deliberately and not as a reaction to an organization getting into trouble as they migrate. So so that's impressive to me, that it was a deliberate, designed approach up front. So.
I think one thing I would also want to add is it's been really refreshing how embedded we've been using some of our Azure resources on our teams. In fact, I would say we're pretty much in line for any product release that's before GA. Our teams are constantly trying to get dates and trying to make sure that we onboard first on these tools. That kind of tells you how far we're advancing really quick on the stack. And I truly feel that we're kind of pushing the envelope on some of the cloud features as well, just in terms of some of the data science and personalization capabilities, including features like model management and using specific features in the stack, app insights, app services, etc., to deploy models and gain insights, for faster productionalization.
So just one more question to each of the panelists before we open up to some open questions. If each one of you can just talk a little bit about where you see your teams moving over the next 16 to 36 months, and really what the future of what your skill sets look like within your teams and how you're focusing on readiness. Just real quick before we...
Yeah, I mean, obviously for my teams, my teams do a great job coming in every day, trying to enable, unlock business value with, the tons of data that we have. I think for us, personalization and, using AI and machine learning at scale and, having the ability to deploy models at scale, with quick iterative turnaround times. We want to make sure we give our users the ability to, iterate at scale rapidly, fast, right? We don't want long, deployment times, with, models that slow us down in terms of unlocking business value. So I think personalization, using, pushing the stack to where we want it in terms of whether it's analytics for store insights, whether it's personalization on end consumers. I think that's the direction we want to go to make it extremely industrialized.
And thanks for my team. In the spirit of true transparency, we've been in production for about 6 weeks. So really for us, the journey has been about how do you learn to crawl, walk, and then run. We went into production in April. We purposely planned for the month of April for us to have some stabilization and learning. So I would say some operational excellence is where we're going to go in the next, the logging, monitoring. Again, the tuning, the optimization, the sizing. We're talking about tons of data that's across 10,000 stores in 16 countries. So really getting, kind of our legs under us in terms of just what's that day-to-day look like. Clearly in the future, as we get out of the crawl, walk, and we're into the run, we really want to take a broad look across the rest of the portfolio, because originally we had thought we were just going to do a lift and shift and that we were going to take things as is to the cloud. It became very clear that it really is going to require some new development. So again, going back through that portfolio And looking at, again, all that new development, taking advantage of all the learnings that we've had with this first project that we had to go to the cloud. So that's our future state.
I would say I'm looking most forward to seeing how we can use cloud to transform what we're doing in the retail space and the infrastructure space. You know, if you think about how the transformation to cloud in the regular world around primitive infrastructure to virtualization to IaaS to PaaS, that sort of thing, we have that opportunity to think about that in how we manage infrastructure for the stores themselves. So we're just kind of getting started there, but I can see that cloud would be a huge play there. So. Yeah.
Great. And just another thing to mention, too, just about some of the future state of Starbucks. There's actually a Starbucks Expo booth out there where we actually have some showcasing of some different experimental type of solutions Starbucks is playing with in regard that leverage the cloud and also traditional Starbucks things. So you'll see an internet-connected coffee machine out there. You'll see a digital order management screen out there. And you'll see a few other examples of how Starbucks is actually doing a digital transformation. So I think to that end, I'd like to open it up to any questions from the audience, if there are any. You know, feel free to really probe at these guys. We have mics here on the side. If you have a question, you wouldn't mind going up to the mic so everyone can hear, that'd be great.
How did you deal with the proprietary data in the cloud? From every time we try to push the data to the cloud, we get a pushback from, no, it's a secret data, no, it's a customer. We work for a large manufacturing company, so in a similar boat.
Fish. Yeah.
I think Vish, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So I think that's predominantly for any data services team. That's like your primary, consideration, right? We live in an age where we're constantly flooded with like regulatory requirements, which is good, and we also want as a company to protect our consumers. So from a data perspective, right, we try to make sure that in fact we have a whole practice dealing with privacy, governance, and in terms of enterprise data management. So what we do is we have like necessary controls in place as we even onboard data into the cloud. I think with the cloud, we have an opportunity now to make sure, since we're kind of early in our journey and evolving, we have an opportunity to kind of sit back and also analyze use cases into why we would need certain kinds of data, whether it's like PII data or the non-PII data. So I think from my perspective on the engineering side, we are actively looking to put like necessarily tooling in place in order to make sure our end users are unlocking the value from the data, but we also make sure the access controls and the role-based controls for users are appropriately assigned. So. And also in terms of the actual regulatory requirements, we try to make sure we adhere to specific regulations that are coming down. So we try to have a forward-looking outlook, and we're also very cognizant of the fact that since we're onboarding to the cloud, we have an opportunity now to get this right, rather than do some sort of a rearguard action later to fix it. So as much as I can reveal, so we're actually looking at a lot of tooling on top of the data sets, as well as working with specific practices within our teams in order to make sure that onboarding of data is seamless and the right people have the right access to data, as well as the right usage of the data as it goes out into these production systems.
Yeah, we can just add a little color to that too, just to give you a flavor, because there was reference to security controls. There's an organization, the Cloud Security Alliance, I believe, CSA, that publishes the Cloud Control Matrix, which is something that we've leveraged with at Starbucks, and I think the greater cloud industry is starting to adopt more to vet these solutions. So if you're interested in more, I would suggest taking a look at that. But just to give you a flavor of what some of those controls actually are, those are checking for things of like encryption at rest, encryption in transit, use of mutual TLS, and some other controls that will always allow you to vet that you can have higher degree of confidence to put more sensitive data in the cloud. I think
I was just going to add to that. Make friends with your security organization, right? Work with them and collaborate with them. Security is everyone's problem, not just a central group's problem. So take accountability for your platforms in your space, and building relationships with them and figuring out exactly how to interpret what they want you to execute will help you go a long way as well. So, yeah.
Is there another question?
Yeah, here.
Yes.
What was your biggest challenge that you faced through the transformation, and what caught you off guard?
Who would like to field that one first? A lot of concerned faces. Vish?
I can address like a current challenge as we're evolving, right? Like I think I mentioned it before. It's essentially catering, like in a massive enterprise like this, it's catering the cloud platform to different personas and different kind of users, right? You have users using a wide range of tools that they've been familiar with for a long period of time. So any kind of cloud transformation, you want to make sure, A, you have that kind of interoperability, as well as you have the user experience that people are used to, or give them something better. So, and the give them something better also comes with a cost, because now you're onboarding different kind of users with different skill sets onto the platform. So for me, I would say one of the biggest challenges kind of maintain that, walk that fine line between like, where you want to go, head towards the future, as well as to make sure that, you're taking along users who've been used to traditional ways of doing things with traditional tooling, and now, get them more acclimatized to the cloud stack.
I'm going to suggest that I think I have an atypical story. Ours is a success story. We actually, and I'm going to look at Sean, who's in the audience, he was actually our embedded Microsoft partner with us. We actually did not run into anything. I think, Sean, the other day we were talking, and you said in your career this is one of the smoothest implementations that you've ever been a part of. And I would attribute that to a couple of things. Again, we did a ton of upfront planning. We had an amazing Scrum Master, and the team came up with 17 sprints, which for us is about 8.5 months, right? But the 17 sprints, we do 2-week sprints. I would say that the success that the team had is when they ran into a technology that wasn't going to work for us. We're primarily a Java shop. I think it was in Premiere or preview mode. We did not spend a lot of time spinning on tech that wasn't going to work. Like, we were able to pivot really quickly, and through proof of concepts, we could say this isn't going to work, and now we're going to go do this. And we were able to pivot and prove that it could. So I would say for us, yes, we ran into some things that we didn't know, but we didn't spend a great deal of time trying to make it work. We just had those other options. So again, I think it's a little bit of an atypical story, but a huge success story of that. Okay.
Another question in the room?
Hi. So I have 2 questions, actually, kind of building on the last one. So one, what was your user sentiment or your business partner sentiment when you guys made the shift to cloud? And how did you kind of deal with that transition, and how did you make them more accepting of the change if they weren't accepting? And then my second question is actually about your Scrum team. So I was wondering, like, what elements of the Scrum team do you think contributed to your success, and like, what did you guys follow that you think made you so successful in the transition?
Great questions. Thank you. I'm going to start with the Scrum team one first. I'm going to say that one of the huge success factors is I have the privilege of I have a full stack team. So I have engineers and SDETs and analysts are all underneath my organization. So we design, build, and support everything that we do. So there's no handoff, if you will. So again, when I talked previously about the business acumen and the domain knowledge, the Scrum teams were there. They had it, they nailed it. So this was really about learning something new. So I would say that from a Scrum team perspective, was great. And the first part of your question about how did the user community feel, for me, and I'm hoping that Todd or Vish can speak to it, what we actually put into production is headless, so there's no users. So for us going to the cloud, it's really about our downstream consumers who our data was, it was in a batch mode every single night, and to run these horrible queries or these reports, it was like yesterday's information. So really for them, getting near real-time inventory was like the unlock for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say that a couple of things that were helpful for the unlock for us on the adoption from a user's perspective, I would say our internal community enterprise was one was executive sponsorship. So from the top down, CEO, CTO, SVP, this was something that was embraced. There was a uniform message around it, and so it was in some ways inevitable that we would obviously continue down the path, but that executive sponsorship makes things much easier to execute, right, and proceed. The other is there's a pretty heavy investment in Starbucks on just training in general. There's a whole program around it, and so as part of this, I don't know if Scott touched on it, but there's the cloud learning program. So that made it very easy for people in the building to go and get real-time training up to date, very simply and easy, low friction, right? So.
I think just from a more futuristic looking view, I would say, in order to enable, to onboard those kind of users, I think one of the main USPs for those users are, the kind of distributed computing that you can get on these platforms to harness that data, as well as the kind of the opportunities around concurrency. Right, so that's something we're trying to, actively harness that data, to use some of the components on the Azure stack to ensure that our users are actually, realizing the gains, based on whatever components do, whether it's data pipelining, job orchestration, distributed data, processing real-time data. So we want to make sure that those advantages are adherent. I mean, they're kind of evident to the users, so it helps in the adoption. So they kind of know what advantages they're getting, and that helps. So.
Yeah, and if I can just add on to that too, just being from Microsoft, working with the organization, I've noticed that there was a very deep engineering and kind of like hacker mentality already within Starbucks before the cloud, and I think having that also helped kind of unlock it, because I think you were open to experimentation and to work, and once you started working with the cloud, I saw very smart people at Starbucks kind of realize it, like, hey, there's something here, and I think continue to invest in it. So I think from my outside view looking in, I definitely see Starbucks as more of a technology company now, and I think that they were kind of helping them kind of adopt that more of a cloud mindset. So another question in the room?
So this might be a little OBE, but so I guess my question was, how did you generate that kind of buy-in, both from, especially at the executive level? I mean, maybe your CEO just woke up one day and decided, I want to go cloud, but I doubt that's what happened. So, what's the backstory?
Well, who wants to take the? Scott, actually, hey, Scott, we got an audience.
So we've been talking about optimizing technology. It's a core part of what Starbucks technology does, whether or not it's an application, whether or not it's infrastructure, whether or not it's inside of our stores. So as cloud began to mature, we've been talking about it. As we look at connecting it to where I was talking before, thinking about how technology enables our experience. You said COO, CFO, CEO. The use of technology at Starbucks to enhance that experience is actually understood throughout our executive ranks. It's a key part, not to be front and center, but to enhance. So as we were sharing out of Starbucks technology, new ways that we can go to market, in the value proposition, they got it, right? So they connected right back in. So what Todd said earlier of, having that executive buy-in, we had it. And when we shifted to a cloud-first strategy, yes, there was a little bit of hesitation from some of the teams, like I'm just about to get going. But because we had the buy-in and because that support, we could bring that support, we have the folks that are up here talking about the successes that we had. So that's what I would say.
I don't know if we see any more questions from the group. So I guess I'll go back to the past really quick here. So what are some of the things, I guess, if you were to kind of go back, replay the last 2 years, some things you would maybe reconsider or reapproach? Any of the bigger kind of pain points or lessons learned from these regards that you would maybe want to share with the audience? Everything was great.
I think I've already shared.
Yeah.
I think we are an atypical experience. It was really successful. And I would really say Starbucks really brought some thought leadership to the table. We didn't go to the cloud without a strategy. To Scott's point, Jerry Martin Flickinger was amazing, really helping us, set that. We got funding, we got resources, we had just a really clear focus with that, which I think those were all the success factors. And then the learning and the amount of investment that we made with our partners going down that new technology would I do anything differently? I feel pretty darn fortunate to have had access to all of those resources and all of the training. I don't know that I would call it painful, and really from a team's perspective, the culture of Starbucks Tech, everybody was there to embrace it, and I actually think there was probably a little bit of pent-up demand, so we were sort of ready to get out of the gate. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Of course.
I should have had a chair up here too. So as I look back over the last 2 years, the point that Annette just made is what I would tell all of you is don't underestimate your team. The developers, the engineers, the analysts, the esthets. So when we reached out and we said, this is what we're going to do, honestly, I was astonished. So my lesson learned was don't underestimate. So I'm sharing that with you guys. People want this. People get excited. If you give them the opportunity, the support, the education, they will take it and run like you won't believe. And the last bit that I'd say, I think to one of the earlier questions around how to drive adoption and communicate success, is talk about your success. So this was, from my point, a snowball. So we reached out and we said, hey, we're going to do this. Let's go find a couple teams. And then they started going and they had success and we talked about it, which then made it easier for the next team to know it was going to be okay. And so the more you can create that virtuous cycle of giving opportunity, giving education, giving support, getting a success, some learnings along the way probably as well, and then sharing that up and down your ranks, you will be, I believe, I know I am for what we were able to do at Starbucks, and I believe you will be as well. You'll be amazed at the velocity, at the adoption, and at the excitement that you can get in a very, very short order. So that would be my advice.
Great. And I think I just add a little bit from actually the Microsoft lessons learned, because us partnering together and really bringing a very large-scale enterprise to Azure and learning that process, especially being a company that's very heterogeneous and very cutting edge. We've definitely leaned a lot on Starbucks to learn about what customer demands are, and it's helped influence our own engineering in turn. So like Java on Azure, we've seen a few Starbucks people co-present there. Same thing with helping us craft a lot of our serverless approach, and even our security mindset as well. So it's definitely been a journey that we've learned as well from Microsoft, so I think it's been great on both sides. So I think to that end, any parting remarks from the board here? I think we only have about 3 minutes left. Any closing thoughts for the team? I think we're out of questions from the audience. Well, I think that's it. I think thank everybody for joining us. And this, I'd like to just mention again, we do have the expo booth out there, so all of us will be here at the booth for the next hour or so. So if you want to come by and ask more pointed questions, drink some coffee, check out the tech, come on down, join us. It's on the far back. If you just walk straight down the center aisle, all the way to the back. Well, thank you, everyone.